YNW Melly has been locked up for what it feels like a decade. After being denied bail time and time again, here's why YNW Melly is being forced to remain in jail until his trial starts. All of this new evidence coming out is very concerning that's against him, and we need to talk about this, so let's get straight into it. Now, on October 26th in 2018, at 3:30 a.m., rappers YNW Melly, YNW Portland, YNW Juvie, and YNW Sack Chaser were all at a recording studio recording some new projects for YNW Melly when things got very scary. When their session was over, they started to head back home. The driver of the vehicle being Cortland Henry, otherwise known as YNW Portland, with YNW Melly sitting directly behind him. And that is with Juvie and Sack Chaser on the other side of the car. Now, YNW Portland, he ended up driving on a back road home. Allegedly, this was to skip early morning traffic. But weirdly enough, this street that they drove on had no security cameras or street lights on the road, which means there's practically no one ever driving on it. Now, while law enforcement doesn't know exactly what happened inside of the car, the theory is that once the car was pulled over to a parking lot that was kind of tucked in the side street, the car was pulled over and a distraction was made inside of the vehicle to catch Juvie and Sack Chaser off guard. With them being caught off guard, YNW Melly ended up doing the act towards the two individuals inside of the vehicle. Now, law enforcement believes this because 2 weeks later after the incident, YNW Melly sent a Snapchat message to his girlfriend at the time saying, and I quote, "I kept Portland with me because at the end of the day, he did one of the realest stuff in my life." Now, this could be taken as a YNW Melly's way of thanking Portland for remaining loyal and not snitching on what actually happened on that day. But after the act was committed, law enforcement believes that the vehicle was parked into a side parking lot where nobody was in sight. There was no street lights, nobody could even see the vehicle or hear a firearm being used. And that's when YNW Melly and YNW Portland, they roughed up their vehicle in a 360 motion using firearms towards it, smashing the windows to make it appear as if a drive-by happened, as this would end up being YNW Melly and Portland's excuse for this even happening when they brought Sack Chaser and Juvie to the hospital for medical attention. Now, law enforcement believes this because it took YNW Melly and Portland 40 minutes to get Juvie and Sack Chaser medical attention after this so-called drive-by. Now, take a moment and pretend that you're in a situation where you're involved in a drive-by. Two of your best friends that are in the vehicle are affected by it in a very bad way, and they need serious medical attention. Are you seriously gonna wait 40 minutes to get them any sort of medical attention? Obviously not. When finally arriving to the hospital, Melly and Portland gave law enforcement the story on what happened. Now, a few weeks later, YNW Melly and Portland were then arrested and brought into jail. YNW Portland was released later on bail. Meanwhile, Melly had to sit in jail, and it's probably due to all of the new evidence that law enforcement has found. This evidence is not good for YNW Melly at all, so let's get straight into all of it. So the main significant evidence that was found was all on YNW Melly's cell phone. The biggest piece of evidence out of it all was him literally admitting to doing it. There was a video of YNW Melly on his cell phone speaking about the situation and just pretty much admitting to doing it while making hand gestures of something going on with his head. You could probably assume at what I'm trying to get at here. So one of the court files then stated, and I quote, "Then also we have a video of Mr. Demons admitting to doing an act towards two individuals in the head." It's pretty significant evidence when on your own cell phone there's a video of you admitting it. Then they also ended up finding a message on Snapchat of YNW Melly saying to his girlfriend, and I quote, "I kept Bortland with me because at the end of the day, he did one of the realest stuff in my life." Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is very significant evidence, as this could be a thank you to Bortland for not snitching and staying loyal to him. A list of even more evidence then came out against Melly. It starts by saying, and I quote, "This video was on Mr. Demon's cell phone, which was brought to my office by Jameson Francis. And that is how we had that." And that was all of the evidence that Your Honor has. Now, why this is very important evidence too is because YNW Melly's cell phone was actually being held by his manager. YNW Melly's manager is better known by 100K Management. He manages many big rappers such as YNW Melly, King Von, and a lot of others. When the law enforcement were having a very tough time with evidence in this court case, they ended up putting out a warrant for the cell phone, meaning whoever was holding on to it had to give it to law enforcement or they would end up having to face their own charges. Now, the next piece of evidence ends up stating these particular cell phones, which were both iPhone 10s, were on the T-Mobile network. T-Mobile has a very interesting feature where it will tell you the environment that the cell phone is in. So from these cell phone records, I can tell you the exact moment Demons got out of the car and staged the drive-by location. Now, remember what I said earlier about YNW Melly taking 40 minutes to get help for Juvie and Sack Chaser after the so-called drive-by happened. Law enforcement believed that they used that 40 minutes to stage it all, to rough up the vehicle with firearms, smash the windows in, and pretty much everything that you can think of. And right here, they're basically admitting to it by saying they can tell the exact moment Melly got out of the car and staged the drive-by location. And they can do so by all of these new add-ons to their technology that they have. I had no idea law enforcement could go back in time and look at cell phone records at where a cell phone was on a particular day. But with all of this new evidence being released, the odds of YNW Melly being arrested and sentenced to life in prison is pretty much almost a guarantee at this point. I am a huge fan of YNW Melly, and I pray that he does get released one day and that he is innocent, but a lot of this evidence